Welcome, my friends. I'm Dave Champion. This is my stupendous co-host, Bill Carnes, and together we are totally unprepared. Now, there is a lot to talk about this week, but this is a local show predominantly. People watch it all over the world via YouTube and on Facebook, but it's a local show, and you have something to say locally before we launch into the whole international scene.
Yeah, you know, every once in a while we like to hit up a local company if they do us right, if they really kind of go the extra way.
And not just us, it's their ethos.
It is. That's just the way they are. The right people, the right mantra, the right customer service, whatever it is, which is the way things used to be, and now not so much.
That's an
But
understatement.
when it's a throwback to that sort of quality, we like to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about a fellow by the name of Jack Champion, no relation.
Oh, yes, I know Jack.
You've met him, and he gives excellent haircuts. He's on Frontage Road in the same plaza as the AT&T building.
Right.
Basically across the street from Walmart. It used to be called Hare's Mikey Barbershop. Now it's Jack Champion's Barbershop.
Jack is an awesome guy.
Totally awesome guy. His wife is also in the industry. Obviously, she doesn't work in a shop with him. And man, I've got to tell you, he's cut my hair twice. They are by far the two best haircuts I have ever had. And for a short period of time, I actually would go into Vegas and spend like $65, $70 on this fancy haircut.
Wow.
It wasn't me. My girlfriend wanted me to have a nice haircut. These haircuts are a lot nicer. They're $15. Tip the guy. He's great.
Yeah.
So anyhow, he's totally cool dude. He's got this big screen TV. They had Canadian football on today, and just a very personable dude.
He is.
And
I'll tell you a funny story.
Amazing haircut.
He used to teach at a school how to cut hair.
Cosmetology, yeah.
And I didn't realize how old he is. He's almost as old as I am. And he looks a lot younger.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I actually ran into a gal who's been cutting hair here in Pahrump for at least a decade, if not longer. And she said, oh, yeah, he taught me years ago how to cut hair. So he has really been around the block, and he is an awesome guy.
Yeah, so check him out.
And no relation, by the way.
Yeah, no relation.
No. Okay.
Let's talk about Brexit.
Yes. The synonym for Britain leaving the European Union. And, of course, this happened, as we're doing this show, about 5 days ago.
Yeah, about a week back.
And, the funny thing is, that, from my point of view, that, first of all, it has set the globalists on their ears, which, because I'm no fan of the globalists, right? But then they say, like, in the first 3 days, the financial markets throughout the globe lost $1.2 trillion in value because of the Brexit vote. Okay. Now, common sense tells us nothing changed in 72 hours.
Absolutely not.
So all that wealth that was lost was actually just book entry wealth. In other words, it exists on some computer because of trades in the stock market and these special computer trading things. That I'm reading a book now called Wealth and Democracy. Fascinating read, right? And they talk about how when computers entered the picture, the uber wealthy, like the 1%, some of their funds or hedge funds that they can get involved in boast more than 37% gains annually.
Wow.
Right. So when you're going boom, boom,
Takes
boom,
money
boom,
to make
boom, boom,
money.
and you're not doing anything, you're sitting in your living room or you're out on your yacht, and some other guy's using your money and producing you 37% profits, more than 37% profits annually, right? Clearly, that's book entry money.
Yes.
That's not real wealth. Real wealth is generated not by playing paper games. The author...
And all of this will come back.
Right.
Well, it's everything. It's all going to settle out. It's all going to come back stronger than ever.
Right. The author of the book that I just referenced, he, quoting another economist, referred to that kind of person as a paper entrepreneur.
Sure.
They're not producing anything, right? So that's the kind of people. The working men and women in England, affected by the exit? No. Working men and women in Europe, affected by it? No. You and me, affected by it? No. But $1.2 trillion was lost in the finance. Yeah, forget it.
Well, what it ends up doing is it ends up taking away some control over the British market. Now, and keep in mind, the Brits kept the British pound.
Yes.
They didn't fully incorporate with the euro.
They did not.
The way the other 18 or so countries did. But there's still a lot of unelected bureaucrats appointed by various governing bodies in these European countries who are the governing organization called the European Union. All unelected bureaucrats.
And that was a huge factor along with immigration, which when you're an EU country, you don't have the right, if the European Union says you're going to take 250,000 refugees from wherever, you don't have a right to say no if you're a member of the European Union.
Yeah.
So
they're out.
And what you were talking about, these unelected bureaucrats running the show, were two of the biggest factors in England leaving the EU.
Yeah.
Did you see Merkel's plan now?
No.
On the heels of this, like, okay, how do we recover from this? Because obviously, I think it stands to reason a lot of other countries are going to leave too now. Okay. So she has now pitched a plan that all the remaining countries are going to become a single country. They're going to give up their parliaments, they're going to give up their armies, they're going to give up their currencies, they're going to give up their own banking regulations, their own central banks.
So let's go into pure, total, unabashed socialism.
Well,
I don't see it happening.
What Merkel's, I don't see it happening either. If countries are going to leave the EU, they certainly aren't going to sign up under this one
New World Order.
Yeah, this one dominant national entity, and give up virtually all of their sovereignty. I mean, with the EU, they retained some sovereignty. Under the new plan, they lose it all.
There's more than 1,000 years. I shouldn't say more than 1,000. There are thousands of years of culture in Europe.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about culture, you go to Europe. It's thousands. They're not just going to walk away from that for some socialist idea. Oh, one big happy.
Right. And everybody.
Are they going to create their own new language?
And everybody forgets Europe existed and in many ways was fat and happy before there was a European Union. Mm-hmm. So the fact that the European Union may dissolve, it's probably going to be the big money players, the guys who are these paper entrepreneurs, the guys who are vying for absolute, like almost dictatorial economic control. Those are the players they're going to lose. The average guy,
you know, the countries that have, there's countries that have been holding up the European Union financially. Germany,
yes,
England.
Yes.
So with some of their manufacturing.
Greenspan said the northern half is paying the bills for the southern half.
Yeah, and look at what's happened with Greece. My God, what an economic disaster.
There you go.
They want to hold on to the EU, because if they have to go back to the drachma is worth precisely squat.
Right, it'd be like 5 million drachma for $1.
I actually have a $10,000 or 10,000 drachma bill sitting on my dresser at home that I found. My buddy married a girl who's Greek, and years ago I ended up getting that for her, and that at the time was worth like $17.
Yeah, so
it's probably now worth
17 cents.
Yeah, whatever. If it costs you $6 to put it into a frame, it's probably worth $6.
Switching topics.
Yes.
Supreme Court's ruling concerning the state of Texas and abortion.
Yes, the very, very strict abortion standards that they were putting in.
Yeah, and it's funny because we had talked a couple weeks back about, well, it's more than a couple weeks, but the Supreme Court's decision in Roe and what they specifically said, the 14th Amendment does not address an unborn fetus. We've talked about the fact that the law does not comprehend anything not born as having any rights.
With the exception, if you kill a pregnant woman, you get charged with double homicide.
Right, and my answer to that was it's never been appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, and I'm sure under the doctrine established in Roe, they would strike it down, which your sort of tongue-in-cheek comment was, or they'd back off of Roe.
Right.
Okay, now, I think whatever side of the issue somebody's on in abortion, I think that this latest decision buttresses the reality that the Supreme Court is never going to back away from Roe, because some of the expositors on this case are actually saying that the Supreme Court took another step forward. I don't believe they did, but some expositors are saying that the court took another forward step. They didn't hold the line as far as their earlier precedents in these decisions, that they actually took another step forward. I disagree. I think they held the line. I don't see any legal step forward. But I think it does show quite clearly on a 8-person court, they still had the majority.
Oh, yeah, 5-3.
To say what you're doing is a contrivance, okay? You're not really trying to protect anyone. What you're doing is you're using that as a fig leaf to create more and more obstacles to a woman exercising her, under Roe, her right to have an abortion. All you're doing is you're creating contrived, fictitious obstacles. You're not being sincere, and we're not going to permit that. And of course, if you read the case, Breyer wrote the decision. He went through and he looked at what the state of Texas was doing, and he pointed out none of this has any significant impact on health.
Here's my question is, if, let's say in this case, the state of Texas passes a law recognizing a fetus as an actual life form at, say, gestation, or 4 weeks, or 16 weeks, whatever they so choose. Right. Then you would end up with a case arguing that eventually at the Supreme Court level, I'd imagine as well.
I don't imagine it would even get there, because since the court was so crystal clear in Roe, I'd imagine at the district court level it would be struck down, at the appellate court level it would be struck down. And much like Utah in the same-sex marriage, because on the erstwhile Dave Champion show, I had dissected Utah's appeal to the 10th Circuit on same-sex marriage. And when they appealed to the Supreme Court, I was flabbergasted, because their argument was so insipid. And I'm not saying for people who believe there should not be same-sex marriage, perhaps their argument are not insipid, but Utah's arguments were insipid. And so it's like, I was shocked that they even wanted to go beyond the 10th Circuit, because the 10th Circuit literally came out and said, it's not that your argument is light in merit, it's that it has no merit. How many attorneys, when you're told your argument has zero merit?
Forget about you. We're going to the SCOTUS. We're going to SCOTUS. Forget it. You don't know what you're talking about.
So I imagine if Texas did what you posit, and they took it to the federal court, I mean, they would follow the same path as Utah. They would get struck down saying this is absolutely in contravention of the constitutional landscape of the 14th Amendment. And then the appellate court would be like, why are you here?
Well, and then, this opens up a whole brand new can of worms, which is the 14th Amendment itself.
There is that.
So,
but the court was right in that, if you go back to the guys who wrote the 14th Amendment, promoted it, and shepherded it through the process of being passed, the court was right insofar as it had absolutely nothing to do with unborn people. That was never the intent of the 14th Amendment.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing about the 14th Amendment is it's been interpreted in so many different ways since its inception. Since
some of them questionable.
Yes, very questionable. Since it was actually put together, put out there, and they've read a lot into the 14th Amendment. And it's become.
It's like a go-to tool.
It really has. Yeah, it really has. Like, you and I are considered by paperwork 14th Amendment class citizens, and we're not. Even
though clearly with the original intent of the amendment, the men who sponsored it, wrote it, and so forth, you and I are not even remotely 14th Amendment
would have nothing
citizens.
to do with it.
Yeah.
We'll be back in the next segment with Dave's Rant.
Do I have one for you today? What is up with dirty tricks in politics, especially by law enforcement personnel? Wow, how ugly is that? Let me tell you a story. I think I'll start that way. I'm at the gym the other evening, and a sergeant on the Nye County Sheriff's Department approaches me, and he says, with a smile, kind of a cocky smile, he says, "So, I hear you're going to run for sheriff." Now, here's the history on that. I considered running in 2010. I chose not to because that was the year that my book, Income Tax Shattering the Myths, was released. And I wanted to promote the book, and it was my first book. I didn't really know it was going to be involved, and I wanted to give it my full attention. And I didn't feel that I could do justice to campaigning to become sheriff while I was trying to learn and execute how to promote the book. So I declined. At the next election, Rick Marshall was one of the candidates, and I figured Rick is highly qualified, uber qualified to be sheriff. Why would I run? If there's going to be a right-minded person who's uber qualified, why am I going to run? I have no desire to draw a government paycheck. That's not even where my head is at. But the point is, having considered it in 2010 and again in 2014, I guess it's out there. For those who don't live in Pahrump, I've never lived in a place that operates more on gossip than this town. I come from a big city, so the gossip thing for me, it's tough to deal with. I've actually not done business with businesses in this town because I've been on the street or in a store and people have come up and said, "Oh, I hear this about you." And total gossip, complete BS. And I said, "Where'd you hear that?" From people who worked at that business. So I don't go to those businesses anymore. That's how much it bothers me. It's just worthless. Everybody knows gossip is wrong, so I'm no fan of it. But this town runs on it, and in the 8 years that I have lived here, I have come to understand, whether I like it or not, sadly, that's the nature of the beast here. So the world is imperfect. So I guess gossip is going around that I'm going to run for sheriff. So this sergeant, sort of in a cocky way, asked me, and I told him the truth. I said, you know, there is so much that goes into that decision-making process. You know, first of all, does anyone want to put themselves through campaigning in a political environment? That's always ugly. Secondly, I remember the last campaign. I'll be 57 in a couple months, and that was the ugliest campaign, the most lying, mean-spirited, disgusting, horrible, ugly campaign ever that I have seen. And it was all the people, all the people who were lying and all the ugliness and the grotesque gossip, including accusing Rick Marshall of pimping his daughter, which just horrible, horrible stuff. And I watched it go down. Who wants to be a part of that, right? Who wants to put themselves up for that? Plus, I have some business things coming up, and can I give everything the time it deserves? So I shared with the sergeant the fact that I've made no decision in that regard, and I assured him I'm not going to run a secret campaign. If I decide to run for sheriff, I'm going to pull the trigger, and everyone's going to know I'll do it publicly. I'll probably do it right here. And then he says to me, question, how do you plan on becoming sheriff as a convicted felon? Okay, now, this was something that was funny when it was said on the Dave Champion's Liberty page, and it really has turned into a tongue-in-cheek comment on the Dave Champion's Liberty page. Every time I put a video up that involves firearms or me dealing with firearms or speaking about firearms, somebody will jokingly say, wait, how can you have firearms? You're a convicted felon. It's all about the tattoos, right? It's a joke. Well, here in town, it's not. By the way, I should clarify, never been arrested for a felony, convicted of a felony, anything, okay? Clean as the proverbial whistle. But now, because the rumors going around that I'm going to run for sheriff, that same ugliness I just talked about in the last election has already begun. And I know who the source of it is, and I know why. It's political. They're trying to torpedo a good man, a clean man's reputation, because they're terrified that I could become sheriff. And then, on the heels of that, not long after, I find out that there's a detective in the Nye County Sheriff's Department who hates me with the heat of the passion of the heat of the burning sun. He rabidly believes that I'm anti-cop, which probably indicates he's a dirty cop, because I am anti-bad cop. I am 1,000% supportive of good, honest cops who obey the law, who obey the policy, who obey the Constitution, use maturity and handle situations on the street in a way that produces a positive outcome for the maximum number of people that you can. If cops are doing that, I am 1,000% supportive of them. So to say that I'm anti-cop, the only person who could think that would be a dirty cop. But this guy hates me with the heat of the burning sun. And he is now, I found out, calling, it's the most ridiculous thing ever. I can barely say it without laughing. He's calling various federal law enforcement agencies, trying to get them to start an investigation of me about my book, Income Tax Shattering the Myths, and the fact that in venues like this, I talk about the truth of the limited scope of the income tax. And, the book is 419 pages, and it's filled with nothing but the law, not my personal opinion, ever. Well, at least not on the income tax. My personal opinion is on some other issues. But on the taxation, it's all the law: Treasury orders, Treasury decisions, regulations, statutes, Supreme Court decisions, you name it, right? Determinations by the Congressional Research Service, and so on, right? So, now, help me out here. My understanding is that writing a book is protected under the First Amendment as free speech, freedom of the press. And there's no difference between somebody like opening the book and reading the passage or me saying, here's what you will find when you look at it. Here's the truth of the matter. It's right there in that book. It's all free speech. So here we have a guy who raised his hand, who took an oath to protect the Constitution, which includes freedom of speech. He is now violating his oath of office, and he is violating the policies of the Nye County Sheriff's Department by using his official capacity when the Sheriff's Department has no interest in me whatsoever, at least on that topic. I don't know what other interests they may or may not have, because this is not a clean department that does things by the book or follows the law. I'm not damning everyone. There's some great deputies, but the leadership, okay, different story. But at least as far as the book and free speech, the Sheriff's Department of Nye County has no game at all, no interest in this. They couldn't even contrive an interest in this. Yet one of their detectives on the clock, using his official position as a detective with the Nye County Sheriffs, is trying to get federal agencies to investigate me so that, should I run, because of this gossip thing that I'm going to run, that I'm under federal investigation. Okay. Doesn't get much more corrupt, let me say that again, corrupt in law enforcement than getting involved in politics and trying to destroy the First Amendment in the process simply because somebody has a personal axe to grind. Boy, if that isn't a reason to actually move forward and run for sheriff, because that culture, that's allowed, that anyone in that agency thinks, I can do this, I can get away with this, this is acceptable in the culture that exists in this agency, is a damn good reason for somebody to become a sheriff to say this stuff is impermissible in a correctly operating law enforcement agency. So here's my question for you guys. And I don't care whether you live in Pahrump, the greater Nye County, I don't care if you live in the United States, anywhere. I want your opinion. You tell me. Okay, the address, there you go, right there up on the screen. Dave@DaveChampionsLiberty.com. I want you to send me an email, and I want you to tell me whether you think I should run for sheriff or I should not run for sheriff of Nye County. I'm looking for your opinion. What do you think, Bill?
And why? I mean, yeah. Leave that graphic up if you would, please, just so folks can take the opportunity to write that down. Because I think it'd be interesting for people to say, yes, you should, no, you shouldn't, and why. Don't just put it in a subject line and then send it off to you.
Yes,
why?
Yes, you should send.
Yeah. Now, when you're talking about this detective that's somehow trying to rope you into something that doesn't exist, that's the sort of thing that this guy's doing on his own. Do you even know this guy?
I've never met him in my life. I know his name. I chose not to share it on the show because my point is not to beat him up. My point is to show, my point is not to attack him personally. My point is to show that the culture under the existing sheriff, law enforcement personnel have no fear of doing incorrect actions like that.
It just takes me back to an old saying that a good friend of mine used to say. He says, the fish stinks at the head.
There you go.
So when you've got somebody in a position at some level that should prevent these things, look into these things, stop these things, redirect these things, and they don't, wherever that level is. I don't know what the chain of command is in the sheriff's department. I know they've got the sheriff, the undersheriff, and then a bunch of sergeants. There's no captains or lieutenants unless somebody's been promoted in the last couple of weeks I never heard about. So this detective probably has somebody to report to. So that would be the first person to stop it.
Right.
If not, they've got something above them or someone above them.
And by the way, as far as I can tell, on a practical basis, I'm not talking about the org chart, on a practical basis, my understanding is this detective reports to the same individual I'm very certain started the claim that I'm a convicted felon. Now, who's within the sheriff's department, and he is the head political dirty trickster. And
the same guy that's been playing the dirty tricks in the last 2 election cycles. Correct.
And I'm pretty confident he was the one that started the claim that I'm a convicted felon. Now, a couple of things are true. Number one, I have a concealed carry permit from the Nye County Sheriff's Office. Felons don't get that. Secondly, the file resides with the sheriff's agency, right? So the very person, this dirty trickster, that propagated the lie, that the political trickster lie that I'm a convicted felon, It's not even possible that he's mistaken, because all he would have to do is, because I'm very open about what I do, right? Everybody knows.
I'm very open about carrying concealed.
That's right. So all he would have to do is go over to a filing cabinet, open the filing cabinet where they keep the CCW stuff, pull it out, Dave Champion, no felon there, right? So they know. The rumor is generated within the very agency that has the background that was done for my CCW, that knows I have no criminal history.
Well, perhaps that's the stinking fish head.
Heads.
Okay.
It's the two-headed, the three-headed fish.
And by the way, I understand that the Nye County Sheriff's Department is actually under federal investigation right now.
It is, and the dirty trickster I'm speaking of is the primary focus of that investigation.
Funny enough, I look forward to hearing what they have to say in the emails.
We'll be back.
This one's gonna make you barf, so go grab the puke bowl before I start this rant. You got it? You got the barf bag, the puke bowl, whatever it is, hugging the toilet? Because here it comes. A new law, actually 3 new laws, were signed into law by Governor David Ige of Hawaii. The first of which, now keep in mind in Hawaii, total gun registration. All guns of all types and styles registered with the police department. He just signed a bill into law, passed both houses of the state legislature in Hawaii, that is going to take their entire firearms database and immediately, as in likely that day, transfer it to the FBI to be put into their database. This meaning if somebody who lives in Hawaii goes out of state, say gets arrested for anything, there is a program that's going to inform the state of Hawaii that one of their residents was arrested in Minnesota for drunken disorderly conduct or whatever. Then the government in Hawaii, the police, where you live in your county in Hawaii, will decide if, because of the arrest, not conviction, not being charged, just the arrest, if you should be allowed to continue to hold on to your guns. You think gun registration is not a scheme or a scam so the government can control you and your guns? You're wrong. This just proved it. As a matter of fact, he signed 2 other bills into law, one of which says that if you are convicted of stalking or harassing or sexual deviancy of some kind, whatever that might be, you can't have a gun in Hawaii anymore. They're deciding that these crimes, some of which are misdemeanors, you won't be able to have a gun. There's another one too. I need to actually just check my reference. I don't want to get it wrong. Oh, if they're diagnosed with a mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder, you give up your guns. Really. Now keep in mind that these are rights that are in the Bill of Rights, part of the U.S. Constitution. Rights that are untouchable by man or government. And now what they're doing is they're defining all of these various things that can happen for you to give up your guns. And they know to come to your house in Hawaii to get guns because long ago they implemented 100% gun registration. They know what you've got and where it is. There's no individual private party transfers because you've got to do that at the police station. And then the new owner has to register that gun there. There's no limitations to that law. There's no exceptions to that law. So what this means is now what they'll be able to do, if this stands by any means within the courts, which I kind of doubt that it does, the legislature could then pass all kinds of things. Imagine this. If you owe fines, be it in the form of parking fines, they can come take your guns from you. If they can pass even a single law that says if we interpret an arrest or a conviction on a misdemeanor or anything else that you can't have a gun, then they can take it to the next step and the next step until it gets to the point where if you want to have a gun, we're totally cool with that. You just have to first submit to some sort of a mental evaluation, because you can't have mental issues and own a gun. So just in the eyes of safety and public safety, before you can own a gun, before you can buy another gun, you have to first each time go through some sort of a mental evaluation at your own expense. And if you owe us even a dime from even a single parking ticket and it goes unpaid, we'll come take your guns. And because we had to do that, we're going to charge you with an administrative fee. And on top of that administrative fee, because we had to go through all this, we're now going to punish you for putting us through that. You can't have your guns for the next, say, year or 2 years or 3 or 5 or 10. So this is the direction that it's going. Imagine that. Now, if Hawaii is actually able to get away with this in any way, shape, or form before it's challenged for some time. Now, keep in mind, the NRA says this is one of the single most egregious anti-gun legislation bills they've ever seen, and I have to agree. If this carries through Hawaii, you know it's going to come up in California. You know we're going to see it in Massachusetts. You know that we're going to see it also in New York, at least in New York City. You know it'll be in Connecticut. You know they're going to try in Illinois, at least in the city of Chicago again. And you know it's going to happen in Washington, D.C. Take some of these big major cities. Take Washington, D.C., New York City, Chicago, L.A. You take the crime, Detroit, throw Detroit in there. Take L.A. out and just go with Detroit. Even though L.A. is massively bigger, look at Detroit. Take these few cities, Chicago, Detroit, and D.C. Let's just take those three. And you take up the per capita violent crime rate in those 3 cities. You make those 3 cities its own country, and that then would become the most violent nation on earth. And it would take the United States, where we're about middle of the road, and drop us way, 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 way down way far down towards the bottom. And we're talking about huge gun control issues that we've got in these 3 cities. So now, Hawaii's a paradise. I don't know if you've been there. I've been there a number of times. It's a great place. I've actually hunted in Hawaii, but I didn't take my own gun. I went there. I know people who live there. I went hunting with a couple of buddies of mine, used one of their guns. So I was able to do that without having to let them know that I've got to get. That's another thing, by the way. Screw the Commerce Clause. Screw what the Supreme Court has ruled on the Commerce Clause. If you travel to Hawaii with a gun in your bag, keep in mind the only 2 ways to get there are by boat or by plane. If you're going to go by ship or if you're going to go by aircraft, you're going to be going through TSA security. When you do that, you must, by federal regulation, declare any sort of firearms or ammunition in your checked bags. That's going to go to the other end, and you are going to have to fill out a form required by the state of Hawaii. Again, forgetting all about the Commerce Clause and forgetting about SCOTUS rulings, that you have to register that gun to yourself for the purposes of whatever you're going to be doing while you're in Hawaii. You can't take a gun there without the state knowing about it. Dave, what's your impression of all of this, if I couldn't guess already?
So much to say. First of all, when you arrive registering is reminiscent of the old law in Vegas and it was made interesting comparison. It was made to deal with gangsters. That if you arrived in Vegas, this was to stop like gangsters coming in from Chicago and stuff like that.
St. Louis, back east.
Right. So
back home.
Yeah, back home. Yes. If you arrived in Vegas, you had 24 hours to register your weapon.
72 it was.
I think originally it was 24.
May have been.
Then they made it 72. Then they did away with it, right?
Yeah, well, then they went to 45 days. Then they did away with it.
Right. So, but the original impetus was to stop people who were arguably identifiable thugs and bad guys, known criminals, from walking around with guns in Vegas. Now, here in Hawaii, they have the same requirement, but suddenly everybody's a thug. Everybody is presumed to be a known violent criminal.
Yeah. And if you own a gun, there's no way to not. If you own a gun in Hawaii and you're on, there's no way to not be introduced into this FBI database. There is no way.
Now, the one that it's all bad, but the one that really leaps out at me as uber bad is the one about the behavioral, diagnosed some sort of behavioral issue. Talk about incredibly overly broad, because if you've ever seen the book of psychiatric disorders that the American Psychiatric Association publishes, I mean, it's...
My shrink has a copy of it.
Yeah, it's thick as hell, and they've been adding stuff by the truckload every year when they publish this, right? Because everything is a disorder now, okay? If you're at your job and you feel that, you're the best worker there, and the numbers prove that, and yet when it came for a raise, other people got a raise and you didn't, okay? And you say, man, my boss is out to get me, disorder. Okay, you have some sort of personality disorder that you think your boss is out to get you.
And I think there's a disorder, because they're creating disorders out of human nature.
Exactly.
It's not a disorder, it's human nature.
Right. There has to be a discernible line, an identifiable line between ordinary conduct of humans, whether the conduct is rightful, whether it's petty, whatever it is, that this is normal human conduct, and not everything is aberrant.
I believe
even though we don't approve, it doesn't mean it's aberrant.
I honest to God believe, Dave, and this might sound a little conspiratorial, this is part of the whole New World Order. Because when the government got involved in healthcare with Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, as they like to mask it, that now has government control and government influence into the medical field.
Sure.
Of course, mental health is part of the medical field. You have to be a medical doctor. But you're a psychiatrist, you're a medical doctor, right, that practices psychiatry. And when the government then is able to help align and maneuver and put these different disorders, put them in there, and then pass some sort of regulation or have an executive outline and some sort of Federal Register area that if you suffer from any of these things, it's just going to be a broad thing, it's going to be a massive book over here, you can't own a gun.
Right. Well, as an example, there's manic depressive, okay? Then beneath manic depressive is bipolar. And then beneath bipolar is something that has the casual public name of baby bipolar, which some mental health professionals argue that it's not really a disorder, which would
can
sort of
you be tripolar? Or quadpolar? Like
we don't want to talk about sexuality on the show.
I'm just wondering if double bipolar would be quadpolar.
So the point is that even the psychiatric industry can't agree on what it is, because this thing, baby bipolar, some healthcare professionals believe it's real. Other mental health care professionals believe it's doing what we're talking about, taking regular behavior and suddenly classifying it as aberrant and therefore some sort of a condition. So that my point is, with this Hawaii thing, that is so tremendously overbroad. I imagine that will last about 3.5 seconds when it gets to a federal courtroom.
Well, I would think introducing into court an argument against it would be Michael Savage's book, Liberalism is a Mental Disorder. I believe that...
So if you say publicly, I'm a liberal...
Yeah, and you got to realize
shouldn't have a gun.
Michael Savage is a PhD, so he's got something going on. Maybe you could introduce that and say, the people that passed this law, the Democrats that passed it and the Democrat who signed it into law, they actually have a mental disorder. So anything they do shouldn't be...
On the Dave Champion show, I actually had a psychiatrist email me, and he said, I agree with you, anti-gunners have a mental disorder.
I wonder where that's classified in that great big thick ass book.
Oh, it's not, because the psychiatric industry is anti-gun.
They pull that one, do they?
Yeah.
We'll be right back. We welcome you back. Segment 4, we're going to go through our email inbox. Now, we encourage you to send us email and ask us about things you want us to chat about, inside about us. Of course, you've asked for folks to send something to your email address about Sheriff's thing. If you send it to this one, it'll get to Dave as well.
Yeah, I'll see it.
But send it to us to daveandbillshow@gmail.com.
We are totally unprepared.
Yes, we are.
Including our engineer.
And you can also catch up with us at totallyunprepared.info. That's where we have all of our show archives, audio archives of the show, if you want to listen to it when you're driving or just hanging out by the pool. Always good stuff. So,
yeah,
there you have it.
Okay, before we get started, we got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. Let's start off, because we can dispose of it in about 60 seconds, with Jeremy's email.
Yes, he asked us if outside of training, do we ever shoot just for the recreational pleasure of it?
Yes, and I can't answer for you, but for me, Never.
No, not even close.
But every time I shoot, I'm shooting for expertise, to further my expertise. But, and I don't know if this is really what Jeremy was shooting at in his email, I have a blast. I mean, there's never been once, that's probably not true, almost never do I take my training too seriously. 99.5% of the time, I'm training and increasing my ability and aptitude and having a blast doing it. So am I doing it recreationally? Yeah, every time. Do I do it ever without the intent of training? Never.
Whenever I shoot, now I don't just go out and shoot for the sake of shooting. There's always a purpose behind that, and it's not recreation. Sometimes I will, I'll lap people's barrels, or put a new scope on there, or I'll do ballistics tests. So all of that stuff will happen as kind of a function of that. Or like if I go hunting or something along that line, that's obviously not defensive training, but there's a purpose behind it. So there's always a purpose behind my shooting, and I enjoy it. But it's also always very serious to me.
It's not like bowling.
No, it's not. It's not like we're in a league and then we just go bowl a few games here and there.
I mean, if I walk into a bowling alley, I haven't bowled in years. I should actually go to the bowling alley just to have fun. But if I go to a bowling alley,
whoa, that's my head,
and I suck at bowling, I could care less. If I were to bring my gun out of the holster and suck, there'd be some issues there.
Oh yeah. So there's always purpose behind it, and always trying to do your very best.
Yeah. All right. So hopefully we answered that well for you, Jeremy. Let's talk about this lovely judge, Judge Posner.
We're talking about likely the least qualified person to be a judge in the United States from the United States.
Based on what he just said.
Based on what he just said.
He is viewed by attorneys and judges throughout the United States as one of the most well-respected judges in America. Okay, within the judicial industry, he's considered the cat's meow. His name is Judge Posner. He's on the Seventh Circuit. And what distinguishes him this week would not, sometimes you refer to a distinguished jurist, which that's a compliment.
I think he gets my the douche award of the week for this one.
This is distinguishing him in a negative way. He was speaking at a public event. And he said that, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's going to be pretty darn close to a quote. He said that law students, attorneys, and judges should not engage in decades, years, months, weeks, or even minutes.
Minutes or even seconds.
Or even seconds of studying the United States Constitution because it is outdated and worthless.
Now, this is the same asswipe that many times in his professional career, I'm sure, swore to uphold, protect, and defend that very same Constitution. Now, what is he doing?
Yeah.
He's saying, I'm high enough on the pecking order that I can say that it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Now, first of all, we have the impeachment clause in the Constitution, and that applies to Congress impeaching judges, right? I think if there is cause to impeach a judge, it is his opinion that the Constitution no longer matters. He has disqualified himself from sitting on the bench by his own admission and remarks. This isn't a witch hunt. The job requires fidelity to the Constitution. And in order to take the job, you take an oath that is your promise to show fidelity to the Constitution. So to take that oath, to sit in a job where you must show fidelity to the Constitution, and then say the Constitution is unworthy of any study because it's worthless, that if there's a reason to impeach a judge. Now, the reason this isn't going to happen, Posner is very well politically connected, and he was on Obama's short list. He didn't make it, but he was on Obama's short list to replace Scalia.
I don't care.
Right. Now,
politically connected, my fat ass. That SOB, because of his own admission, needs to be gone. Not yesterday, not today, last friggin' week.
I'm with you. As soon as the words came out of his mouth.
He may as well have said it while wrapping the noose around his neck and making sure it was tight enough so when he jumped off the stage, it would snap his friggin' head off.
Now, even absent impeachment by Congress, the bare minimum, any case that comes before the Seventh Circuit that deals with a constitutional question.
Virtually all of them.
Well, there are just statutory stuff, civil cases, things like that. But any case that comes before the Seventh Circuit that deals with a constitutional principle, he should be required to recuse himself. Now, that would be the minimum standard in a nation that functions based on principles and morality. Let me rephrase that. A judiciary that functions on principles and morality. I can assure you, no one will show the testicular fortitude to ask him to recuse himself. And if somebody happens to grow a set and ask him to, he will not do it. And the entire judicial system will let this stand. That's how corrupt our nation has gotten.
I once looked up how many federal judges have been impeached by Congress. And if I remember right, it was in the single digits.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
It's like 240 some odd years or so of this country being in existence. It was like 8.
Yeah. Jefferson said, and I quote, "Impeachment is but a scarecrow. It doesn't really, it's there, but it's not really doing the job."
No,
yeah.
It's not.
All right, so again, Judge Posner, oh, by the way, I should tell you, unlike the media representations of Posner, that he's this most august, respected jurist, and he's written, these pieces that other attorneys and judges study, I actually looked into his background. All of his mentors are hard left.
Oh, imagine.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's look at the qualities of what Mao used to write instead of the U.S. Constitution. How about that?
It's all equal.
Yeah.
According to Posner.
So there was something else we wanted to discuss. It was in our
Oakland
email
PD?
inbox. Yeah, Oakland PD. They've been on. Basically, they've been overseen by.
They're under a federal consent decree.
For what? Last 5 years or
12
so?
years.
12
years.
More than a decade.
Yes.
Yeah.
For letting their officers run rampant and not providing acceptable accountability through the internal affairs function.
Yeah, it's essentially, we all bleed the same color blood, we all bleed the same blue blood,
right.
And we're going to let each other get off doing whatever we want.
I got your back.
Yeah.
No matter
Don't
how
you worry about it.
Yeah. No matter how bad you break the law, I got your back.
So what do we have? We have a cop that was engaging in a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old prostitute. I don't know what genders these folks were.
Okay, he's a male, she's a female.
Okay. And 17 in California is underage.
It is. Statutory rape. And he encountered her he stopped like a car and she was there.
Within his job function.
Yes, and encountered her and they started talking and they formed a actual real live relationship. Not boyfriend, girlfriend, she's a hooker, but a relationship which included sex when she was 17. This came to light because the officer committed suicide and left a note detailing the whole thing.
Okay.
So the cops bring her in to investigate the claim that is this true, that this sworn officer was banging a 17-year-old. Well, it turns out when she starts talking, she's knocking it out with cops from 4 other agencies in addition to this guy. And some of them are paying her cash, which means they're engaged in the act of prostitution. And others are not paying her cash, but they're warning her of prostitution stings so she can steer clear of the area. And I think it was Contra Costa County. Mm-hmm. She testified at deposition that a sergeant, she was banging it out with a sergeant there, right? And now they're not under a consent decree, right? And it says they investigated and cleared the sergeant of any wrongdoing.
Sure. Well, we have Oakland PD,
right,
who goes in to investigate this for what, about 6 months?
It was with IA for 6 months. There were no resignations. No one was suspended, and the court order is that anytime they open an IA on any officer, they are to inform the court's monitor.
They have to.
Mandatory, not discretionary.
So in this case, they did not.
They did not. And so, when the story broke, the monitor heard about it. The story broke in the press. The monitor heard about it, went to the court and said, I was never informed of this. And they've had this under investigation for 6 months. The court orders the monitor to pull the IA and take control of it, right? 6 months, nothing. 48 hours after the monitor takes over the IA, 2 Oakland cops resign. Multiple officers are suspended. Now, to me, the implication is clear, especially the resignations. These guys thought they were covered as long as their fellow Oakland cops who are the ones conducting the internal affairs investigation, as long as their buddies had the IA, no reason to resign. No one was going to get suspended. No one was going to get fired.
Internal investigations are suspect on their very surface, by their very nature.
Absolutely, they have to be.
I believe that internal affairs, like I had an idea that internal affairs in Nevada, that there should be an organization that is operated by some department within the state.
Or something like the ACLU, an outside organization.
Perhaps, but you'd get trained detectives that would be assigned to this area for, say, 2 years at a time, but they couldn't investigate their own area, their own agency. Like if somebody's from Las Vegas Metro, they could investigate Nye County or Churchill County or Reno Sparks or anything like that, but they couldn't go in and they couldn't investigate Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, Henderson, or Mesquite. Right. Something along that line. Keep it out of your own area. Therefore, you have a more independent set of eyes, and you're not buddy-buddy with some of the folks that you're investigating.
And we've seen this in the judicial realm. We've seen this in the legal realm. We've seen this in the medical realm. Having people in your same industry police you
has always been a corrupt disaster.
Absolutely.
And it will continue to be until it's changed.
That's very correct.
Thanks for sticking around. Good time. We'll see you after Independence Day next week.
Take care. Bye-bye.